emotions.
What are they?
What are emotions? Okay, emotions, this will seem trivial, but emotions are one of the ways that we express ourselves. Now, we have different ways of expressing ourselves. One of them, of course, is intellectually. We can intellectually express ourselves, which means we talk, we interact, with our mind. That's an intellectual expression of who we are, what we say, how we do it. But our emotions are also another level of expression of who we are. Who we are isn't just what we know. It isn't just what's in our intellect. It's also our feelings. So emotions are just an innate way that we express our being. Now, what are emotions good for? Well, emotions are a wonderful feedback source for most of us. That's the purpose that they serve. It's one of the purposes that they serve. It's just a mode of expression. But one of the main purposes is feedback. If you want to know how well you're doing, just look at your emotions. How do you feel about things? That will tell you how you're doing. Not necessarily how you act, because most of us have been civilized to the point that we act very politely most of the time. And if we act politely most of the time, we even begin to believe that we are polite most of the time. And then somebody kicks sand in our face, right? And then that emotion rears up, and we roar, right? And we're mad and we don't like it, and somebody slights us. And if you want to know who you really are, pay attention to that emotion, because that will show the inner side of you, the core. So those emotions are very good feedback. Now, some people hardly have emotions, right? They are so left brain that they feel very little. They don't have much in the way of emotion. They don't feel much emotion. Well, don't be fooled. They have emotions. They have feelings. They just don't express them. Very left brain people have plenty of feelings, but they don't share them. And if they do share them, they share them intellectually. They talk about them, perhaps, but mostly they don't even like to talk about them. But they hardly ever, we're talking about men here, right? I see you over there, all the ladies are nodding their head, and all the men are just sitting there. So that's the nature of left brain people, though. They do have those feelings, and they have the same kinds of feelings. And they feel hurt, and they feel upset, and they feel enraged, and they feel, put out, and all those other kinds of things. They just stand there and don't show it. Okay, because that's just the way they are. They don't express themselves that way. So everybody has those feelings. And again, if you want to know what's inside of you, look at your feelings. If your feelings are happy and love, and you're so happy to be here, and it's positive and it's cheerful, and that's the way you feel all the time, then you're probably a pretty evolved being. Because evolved beings kind of feel that way a lot of the time. But if not, if little things, little slights, what did he say? What did she say? What are they doing? You start all of this stuff, and you see these feelings. Well, that tells you where you are. So that's another thing emotions are good for.
Could you expand a little bit? Thank you. Could you expand a little bit about on this whole suicidal thoughts theme? Just a little bit about how to heal that or how to address that.
Well, the thing is with suicide, with most suicide, is that the person's reality begins to shrink. Okay, we have realities, and these realities take in a pretty large swath of things. We have jobs, we have friends, we have people, we have neighbors. There's a world out there, and we're involved in what's going on in the world, and it's big. As a person gets suicidal and gets depressed, that reality starts to shrink and shrink and shrink, and pretty soon there's nobody in it but themselves and stuff that's awful. Everything's awful. And even it's just a small thing. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's, they got fired from a job or some other kind of thing. And their whole world is focused down to their misery. It's like, you're intent. Well, their intent, their focus is on their misery. Well, if you focus on your misery, what do? You make yourself more miserable. And the more miserable you are, the more you focus on it. The more you focus on it, the more miserable you are. And that's just a downward spiral that brings that reality down to where there's nothing else in the world that matters other than how miserable they are, and perhaps what's making them miserable is the only other thing allowed in there. Well, that's a very narrow reality. The way that you can try to deal with that is to try to open that reality, but it's very hard because they are very focused on that. If you try to say, well, things really aren't so bad, you know, I mean, look at this is good and that's good, and they'll find all kinds of reasons why all that's horrible, or that doesn't matter anyway, it's only this one thing. So it's a matter of trying to open that reality to find something that they could find as positive, anything that they might construe as not negative, and work with that, and then try to build that into something else that's maybe not negative, and try to build that. So if you can find something that they can deal with that's not negative, some emotion, some feeling, some person, some aspect of their life, some future event, whatever, if you can just hook their focus on something that's not negative, you can generally build it and expand it. So that would be one thing. But their problem is a small reality. It's just the opposite of growth, where the reality gets bigger and bigger and more expansive and takes in more things and is more loving. You know? And usually what they're angriest at is themselves. Typically it's not really the boss or the girlfriend that jilted them or all those kinds of things. Those are all just excuses. Those are explanations of why they're upset. What they're upset about is themselves. They're a failure. They're not making it. They're not adequate. They're not worthy. And that's, you see, why it's so hard to get them out of it. Because they're feeling the negativity is self. You know, it's towards self. That's why they can destroy themselves, because they have such negativity toward themselves. Now, as far as when a suicide victim comes out to that virtual reality where, you know, you have to work with those people, well, they're treated very gingerly at first, you know, and they have to say, well, that's gone now, you know, that's over. That terrible thing you had, you know, it's no longer there. And try to work with them. But it takes more energy and more effort to do that, because they are so tightly focused that you have to widen that focus out. Not impossible, but it takes a lot longer. It's a more traumatic transition for them. And many of them tend to be obsessed with something. Now, having said all that, that sounds like I'm a psychologist. A lot of these problems are organic. It's not just their psychology and inward focusing is creating a problem. A lot of these problems are organic. In other words, there's a biochemistry problem in their brain that makes everything look dark. It makes everything look awful. And it's not just that you know, they're self-focused and they have all this ego, but that's the perception. You see, we get the data and then we have to interpret it, and how we interpret it is based in you know, it's kind of our brain. We interpret it and store it, and that's the you know, the local computer that's holding us, you know, is the brain. Well, if that's damaged and doesn't work right, the perceptions aren't right. We don't perceive things properly. And if we don't perceive things properly, we can perceive them as terrible when they're not, just because that part of our brain that would perceive them as good is dysfunctional. Or that part of the brain that perceives them as terrible is overfunctional. You know, so a lot of the suicides are just organic brain chemistry problems. And it's sad, there's not a lot you can do other than medication, which sometimes works wonderfully, and sometimes it makes it worse.